in this journey called parenthood, which I'm sure you can all relate to. We had a wonderful turnout at the middle school yesterday, and we're looking forward to today's talk here at Higher. And I wanted to share a little bit about Gloria with you before we give her the mic. I guess I should back up even before that. If you don't mind, just silence your cell phones while you're thinking of that. And make sure you have the handouts. There was a full-page handout at the front table. If you did not get that, please let us know. We'll make sure you get that. But it has a listing of all of our programs that we've had this semester, as well as a reference to the P.E.C. webpage so that you can pull up various handouts and even links to videos of the programs that we were able to record. So it's a wealth of information. Just wanted to make sure you knew about that. That's on the yellow sheet of paper. And we also appreciate your filling out a survey, which is the orange sheet today, just so that we can get your feedback on today's program so that we can continue to improve and give Gloria good feedback too. So thank you for taking the time just to fill out that survey and returning it to us upon your reading today. And just to finish thanking you for your donations to the Parent Education Committee. It's through your donations that we're able to bring wonderful speakers like Gloria to our district and offer these sessions free of charge, which is just a huge bonus in my opinion. So thank you for your continued donations to the Parent Education Committee. Okay, now to Gloria. Gloria is an internationally and nationally acclaimed educator, author, and speaker, and has over 30 years of experience working with children, teachers, and parents as a classroom teacher herself, a reading specialist, a district administrator, university instructor, speaker, and consultant. Ms. DeGaetano is a best-selling author and has written several books, one of which is out front, or we're getting more copies. One book is Screen Smarts, A Family's Guide to Media Literacy. Another is Stop Teaching Our Kids to Kill, which is a call to action against TV, movie, and video game violence that she wrote along with Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. And manuals for educators and child advocates, which include Television and the Lives of Our Children, and the Media Smart series for students ages K through 5. Her latest book, Parenting Well in a Media Age, has won the 2007 iParenting Media Award for Excellence. Ms. DeGaetano's books and articles have been translated into multiple languages, including Spanish, German, Danish, Romanian, Korean, Turkish, we learned yesterday, Chinese, and, or did I say Korean? Chinese as well. A respected voice for children and parents, Ms. DeGaetano's ideas and articles have appeared in numerous publications, including McCall's Magazine, Parenting Insights, American Baby Magazine, the Boston Globe, Committee for Children Newsletter, the American Academy of Pediatrics Newsletter, and the Catholic Faith and Family Newsletter, or magazine, excuse me. She's an innovative leader, and Ms. DeGaetano has appeared on the Today Show to discuss Baby Einstein videos, and has been interviewed on many national radio shows, including NPR's Fresh Air and Marketplace, and the Tavis Smiley Show. The Parenting Coach Institute, which she also heads, has been featured on news programs by NBC affiliates throughout the country, and newspapers and magazines including Newsweek, Parents Magazine, the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. I'm so glad that she's here to join us, and I hope that you know that she has not only relevant information, but practical advice as to how to parent well in this digital media age. Just so you know, Gloria's going to talk for a little bit, and then she'll open it up for questions, and then talk some more. So we're going to break up the program just a little bit. Please help me in welcoming Gloria DeGaetano.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Janelle, if you're here, all of those who helped bring me here. I know it takes more time to plan something like this than the actual event, as you probably all know too, if you have been planning anything like this. So there's always so much to say and so little time to say it. 25 years of research now in this issue, and what Laura also, it's not in my professional bio, I usually have it in there, but I'm a mother too, and that's where I learned everything. And my sons are now fully in adulthood and doing pretty well. It's possible, and they're raised to fetched up right, as my husband would say, but not always easy. In 1985, I realized that media impact was impacting everything, from schools to ways people got along or didn't, to children's behavior, to learning problems or not. And I started my quest at the University of Washington Library, the Suzzallo Library. At the time, there was no Google, there was no internet really of anything. You couldn't research other than going to the stacks. And I went into the stacks because one of my I was a school district administrator supervising reading and language arts programs for a school district, a suburban school district outside of Seattle. And one of my student helpers said, "Did you see the movie Brazil?" And I said, "No." He says, "You got to see it. This is where we're headed." Brazil, not The Boys from Brazil, but Brazil is a science fiction, surreal movie. You know it. Kids are imitating the violence that they see. And it's scary and definitely prophetic. So I went and I started researching media violence and its impact, and I came across a study. This was in 1985. I came across a study that was completed in 1984. It was a 22-year longitudinal study done out of the University of Chicago. Leonard Aaron and Athelia Hewson, very famous researchers, which I didn't know at the time. And this was 22 years of studying little children from ages 6, 7, and 8 through all of those years to see the impact of media violence. Well, at the time it was called television violence. Television violence on their life. Oh my gosh. Statistically significant incarceration rates, abuse of spouses, and second generation, those who have had children, were more aggressive than their parents. And this study was a very tight study. They looked at all the other factors. There's never one thing. That's one of my mantras, which I hope to say a lot today. It's never one thing. It's never just media, right? But this was this wake-up study. I, here, am an educator. I'm a school district administrator. I don't know about this. And it's 1985. This had been out since a year, and I'd never heard of it. And it was 22 years of a study. So I went back to the staff and the teachers I was working with, and none of them had heard of it. And I talk about it today because most people have not heard of it. And Athelia Hewson and Leonard Aaron are still going strong, and they have several other longitudinal studies. And there are over 2,000 studies, which we can talk about. And this is only just media violence, but there's all kinds of impact on overuse, what I like to call overuse, and misuse of screen technologies. And when we look at overuse, we want to look at guidelines, which we'll look at today. And when we look at misuse, we want to look at the timeliness of what is timely for your child, in your family, in that age and stage of development. We forget about timeliness. We remember it when we plant our garden. And we know that not all the tomatoes will ripen at the same time. We don't plant our garden in the winter, usually, unless it's root vegetables and it's later winter. We know that there's a timeliness to living systems. There's seasons and there's timeliness. There's timeliness to brain development. And that is another piece I want to talk about today. It's so critical, we're forgetting about it. Children's brains are not adult brains, and they're not miniature adult brains. They can't handle everything adults can handle. And I know you know that because you're here. and you're concerned. So I want to give you relevant information and working knowledge. That's how I like to frame this. And so I have about 4 pieces of relevant information and working knowledge. And with that working knowledge, you'll get ideas and strategies and things you can do depending on how you want to implement what we talk about today. But what I'm so pleased to have worked on for 25 years, this issue, is that I've studied and looked at ways to synthesize the information so that I can give you the best of the information in these next 2 hours. And it's the best of the best. And I will guarantee, if you do 80% of these things, you aren't going to have any problems with media and digital devices impacting your kids negatively. I can give that guarantee. I know it. This research works. This information is powerful. I have been in this game long enough now that I'll run into people on the street in the grocery store. Oh, Gloria DeGaetano, oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And it's so embarrassing. They thank me. I did what you told me. I did. I'm so glad I saw you. I'm so glad. And my kids are in college. My kids are doing so well. And I made these changes in my family. And this happened and this happened. And you're right. Yes! The media may not want you to know this information because they need to get the next cell phone in the next hands, and it's not information that's out there. I feel very clear about it. So clear that after Columbine and my book on media violence came out in 1999, I started the Parent Coaching Institute, and it's now grown to Parent Coach International, in which I train educators and counselors, social workers in a coaching model based on some of this research and also leading edge change process. Because since 1987, when I left my job as a school district administrator, I realized that if we don't get this issue right, we don't get anything else right. And it's been my passion and mission. So that's a long way to say, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad I'm here. Thank you. If you were to look into a crystal ball, let's just say you have one, you have a picture of one, and you were to look into this crystal ball, and you could see your child, son or daughter, 10 or 15 years from now as an adult. Let's say you're having dinner at a nice restaurant, and this son or daughter as an adult is across the table from you. Who is this person? What do they value? What are their qualities? What are they excited about? What are they talking to you about? Are they present and available to you, or are they closing their eyes and in virtual reality? Because who knows what will be there? We'll just have a little thingy in our ears by then, right? 10, 15 years. What are they excited about for their life? Are they feeling fulfilled? Are they using their talents? This is a wonderful exercise, and if we had more time for our workshop, we would do this exercise, because what I have seen across the board, whenever I do it and allow you to talk and give the ideas, you know, it's like all parents want their kids to feel fulfilled, to be happy, to be doing work that they enjoy, to be productive citizens, to have their intelligence to the optimal level, to be using their creativity, to feel fulfilled, to be empathetic, compassionate, loving, to be kind, to be caring, to be able to volunteer, to support other people, to be a good friend. It goes on, but you know, you see the pattern. Cognitive, emotional, social intelligence, cognitive optimal development. The whole child had been addressed so that the adult becomes a self-actualized adult. And this is an exercise you can do with your spouse, or if you're a single parent, with friends and family, to get yourself into a space of, who are these people? And one time, I was having dinner with my son and his girlfriend at the time with my husband, and I started crying at the dinner table, and my husband goes, "What's going on?" I go, "This is what I visualized. This is who I was thinking I could. This is. But it was so hard. You know, I remember sitting next to him trying to write a 5-paragraph essay when he was in a junior in high school, and we were both. I mean, I was so angry. You know, it was like, this teacher was some ex-professor, and it was like, oh my God, they're crazy here, what they expect. And I was an English teacher, but he couldn't get it. He couldn't get it. He couldn't get it. And so he got it. I mean, he's working on a doctorate. He did get it. But the time that it takes to do it, and all the effort that we put into our kids, those of you who have grown children know what I'm talking about, how beautiful it feels. So anyway, I was living my visualization and having that dinner. How do we get from where we are now to where we want to be with our son or daughter? And part of it is to think about the role of media and the role of digital devices, screen technology, as a way to support us or as a way to hinder us. Ellen Goodman has a great quote here from the Boston Globe. The media become the mainstream culture in children's lives. Parents have become the alternative. Americans once expected parents to raise their children in accordance with the dominant cultural messages. Today, they're expected to raise their children in opposition to it. You know, it used to be the tribe helped us. The tribe was we were part of the tribe. We could rely on the village to support us because we were all closely connected. And it's still like that. We have, I work with some people in Kenya, and you know, they still can walk around in some of their areas, and all the adults can support the children even if they're not related, and because they know what those parents want for those kids. But it's fastly disappearing. It's fastly disappearing. So we're alone in this, and who influences our kids? The media. The media is pervasive. There are 6 major challenges that I won't go into, but part of, and I have those in a chapter in the book, Parenting Well, for those of you who've read it or want to. It's, what I wanted to distill out is that we're in a different society that has, it's unprecedented. Because we have a mass media delivery system, okay? So we have this, 5 people owning and operating everything we see and hear from mass media. 5 basic companies, or 4 depending on how you count. Then you have 2 or 3 basic companies that deliver through screen technologies, deliver those messages. So how do we live in a personal culture and influence our kids when this massive culture is often, not always, but often very much in opposition to what it is we want for them? It's a tricky business, as you know. And it creates a lot of contention since the peer group is being influenced more by mass media much quicker and much more overwhelmingly than we can influence our child's peer group. We don't have direct access to our child's peer group the way mass media has. So thinking through how we parent in a media digital culture that has this mass influence, which we didn't have when we were living hundreds of years ago in tribal culture. But now we have it. It requires a different way, a new way to think about parenting. So the media can talk about helicopter parents all they want, and they can diss parents who are involved. But you know what? A lot of those helicopter parents are parents who are trying to do their best and to care for their kids, because the dangers are unprecedented, because where the kids can go has never been this great access to the world through a phone. So these are pieces that to take into consideration, and to know, though, that the bottom line, and the very bottom line for me, is that you're more powerful than anything that children see or read or do with digital devices. Parents are still the greatest influence in kids' lives. And when we start with this question, and this is the question that I'd like us to think about answering at the end of today, what has to have occurred during your child's or teen's development in order for him or her to become a self-actualized adult, that adult you want to be sitting across the dinner table with, that you're very proud of, and that adult is leading a life of innovation with technology, and lives with technology optimally, not for technology. The tethering of ourselves to our devices is creating two major problems. The addiction that kids have, where the national average is 8 hours a day in front of or doing something with a screen. 8.5 hours for kids 8 to 18 in the US. Not in every country, but in the US, yes. The second major problem here, then, is what is life? What does life become if their life is in screen all the time? Now we know, and I know, I have a distance learning program. It's worldwide. I started it's not entirely online. There's a lot of personal telebridge conference calls and so forth, 36 throughout a year. So I tried to create a distance learning program in the year 2000 that combined a personal way of delivering information, but using the technology. So I'm not a Luddite. I'm not saying we don't use the technology. I'm saying that if we overuse it in childhood, it's very likely that that child will be addicted or habituated to screen technology, will not use their optimal self, their development, and won't be the innovative leaders we need as technology explodes into virtual reality and more robots wandering around among us. So what we can do to prepare our kids best to live in this new world, so it's not a brave new world, but it's a new, beautiful world, is to meet their developmental needs. And this isn't a very cachet kind of message. Oh, meet developmental needs. Oh, cognitive, emotional, social, what is this about? It isn't like, it's not very, I don't know, it's been a hard sell, let me put it that way. It's been a hard sell over 25 years. If we think about, though, what is missing, if that doesn't happen, then it can be really scary. And we wouldn't think not to water the plant on the shelf. We wouldn't think not to look at it, and if it were drying out, to do something about it. We wouldn't think about turning it to the sun or putting it in another room. Our children are living systems, and so are we, and we have to have our needs met. If we don't have our needs met, we can't do anything. We can't be who we're supposed to be. It's that basic, but yet, in a media digital age, it seems to be that complicated. Children's developmental needs are not getting met. And yet we know what they need. If we know the brain science, we know what they need. And over the decade of the 90s, gosh, it was very clear what kids needed. And by 1999, that's why I shifted my career a little bit to get off being the sage on the stage, or the sage under the stage, and be the guide by the side, and go into more of a coaching process so that we can help the daily decisions parents make, because your daily decisions are going to impact your child's cumulative development. And those daily decisions, it might be just the simplest decision like, okay, we're not going to watch a DVD on the way to school today, we're going to just sing some songs or tell some stories, and you are going to look out at the beautiful sunshine. not on a screen. It might be just a simple thing like that that's going to make a difference. And I'm going to explain why I think some things like that over time will add up to major differences. We can't underestimate your influence. So that's the most important message I have, is that you are the most important influence in determining who your child will be and who they will become as an adult. What I had thought about a while back is this concept of parenting identity. And I want to talk a little bit about that because it goes into the living systems concept idea. And I am very much a systems thinker, and some of you may know about systems thinking. I really love it because it helps us get through the muck of a complex culture we're in and start looking to leverage what are the things we can do. And anyway, in a living system, everything has its own identity if we don't mess it up as human beings. You know, if we don't change the DNA, a lilac bush will always be a lilac bush. It won't ever grow and become a rose bush. It's always a lilac bush. We plant an acorn and we always get, if it grows, if it gets what it needs, we always get an oak tree. How about that? If we change the DNA, then if we mess with it, of course, we can mutate different species now. But in the natural world, the natural order of things is the identity is really important. And I study this more and more, and one writer, Margaret Wheatley, says, you know, every living thing, the first thing it does, from a cell to a universe, is to put a boundary around itself. When the baby is conceived, the cells start differentiating and they decide, oh, I'm going to go be a brain cell. I'll be a heart cell. Okay, I'll go be a liver cell. And that's what those cells become. The universe puts a boundary, and every universe that's created, every star that's created, puts a boundary around itself, so then the chaos and everything can happen inside that boundary. So identity becomes now a place of clarity, a place where you have said, I am this, I am not this. This is my identity. And each one of us has our unique identity as human beings. We have our unique talents, goals, priorities, values, strengths, for a reason that we contribute to the collective consciousness. We contribute our unique identity to create the whole, W-H-O-L-E, to create the clarity of the whole. Well, media sure has its identity. Apple has really, Steve Jobs is brilliant on his identity. And it's not bad to have a brand. I have a brand. I want to say, this is who we are. If you come into this training program, this is what we are. Here's what we're not. Then we attract like-minded people and we have fun. It's great. The concept of identity actually, from a living systems, filtered down. If you ever wondered where vision statements and mission statements came from, I bet your company has a vision statement, a mission statement. Where did that come from? Did you ever wonder? I did, and I start researching it. It seems like, well, this just emerged. When I grew up, companies didn't have vision statements. These vision statements emerged out of living systems theories, out of biology, saying that if you have an identity that is your unique identity, okay, then you have this way of distinguishing yourself from the crowd. And what we know from living systems in the natural world, the identity helps them weather the storms around them. It keeps that identity part of who they are. They don't change. So the vision statement and the mission statement became a way to clarify your values and to say who you were. Now we have taken that even further with all the branding and the TMing and so forth, and some people think it's a bad thing. I'm not sure it's that bad, because I think that it is important to have a clear identity. When you have clarity about who you are, you can focus on what you want. And that clarity-focus dynamic is a very big one in our coaching model, because you can't really focus on doing the steps towards what you want to take until you have clarity. So part of my encouragement is for you to really take a look at what are you clear about in terms of your values, your priorities, what you really want for your children and your family. What is so important to you that you just embrace, that you love, that's a part of you? If it's really important for you to have 3 or 4 meals as a family, and you've lost the way on that, what will help you get back to saying, you know, I want that for us. I think it's important in my gut. I want it. I can give you the relevant information, and I can give you working knowledge and strategies. Your inner wisdom, who you are, what your intuition is saying, is most important. And how to harness that again, how to bring it back. It's worth fighting for. If it's important to you, it's worth fighting for. I realize that. I'm still here. I'm still doing this work. And it hasn't been easy. You know, I've been silenced. When I was on the Today Show, I was silenced. I can tell you a story about that. I mean, because I'm speaking what is in my integrity to say. I can't be bought out. That would be my identity. So as parents in a media now, digital, chaotic culture, how to support our children on their trajectory with direction and guidance, it all starts from your clarity on what you value, what's important to you, and what you're willing to be uncomfortable with supporting, because your peers may not like it, and they might not be doing the same thing. And it might be harder for your kids. But who is going to lead the society to a transformation? I believe we have the obligation to do that. If we keep going the path we're going, well, we can just see what's going on. I mean, that doesn't, we can look at that crystal ball and see what's going to happen to kids, to neighborhoods, to families. There's a system, right? So in that system, let's just talk about the 4 realities in the system. And you're in the middle, right? You're in the middle of all this. And your choices are in the middle, but you also have your reality. You have your friends, you have your spouse, you have your stresses, your work, your time constraints. You have your reality of what you want for your children, your expectations of them. Opposed to that is your child's reality. Your child has a certain type of reality, growing up in a digital age as a digital native, knowing all these things, being able to learn quickly, to be curious about screen technology, to want it. Your child's reality is also their vulnerability of the brain development. They don't know that. You might know it, but that's part of their child's reality, conscious and unconscious. Then we have the brain science, which is a huge important reality to bring into this mix here. We know so much about the mammalian brain and what it needs. We wouldn't think of locking a puppy in a cage for 3 or 4 hours a day and saying, puppy, you can't move. Puppy, you stay in this cage. And while you're in your puppyhood, you're going to be in this cage for 3, 4 hours every day in, day out, day in and day out. We wouldn't think of it. That would be cruelty to that puppy, because puppies need to, what? Move, as we know, and chew, and romp, and run, and play. Because the mammalian brain of that puppy has an imperative to move. Its sensory nervous system, it can't develop unless it moves. But toddlers, 18 months old, with screens 3-4 hours a day. Well, yeah, they're not moving, they're not into everything. They may be easier to control now, but they won't be later. I guarantee it. There is a huge risk for more lack of cooperative behavior, aggression, because they're not getting their need met for an 18-month-old. An 18-month-old needs to romp and run and be in the dirt and play and get dirty and get wet and feel the sensory experiences of the 3D, concrete, emotional life. They need it. It can't be done any other way. You can't fool Mother Nature. You can't say, oh, well, but he loves this iPhone. He loves the iPad. She just is so good at it. Yeah, of course. She's curious. She loves it. Yes, yes. 20 minutes a day if you have to. But no more. But they'll want it more. Yes, they will. Because their brains are vulnerable. Of course they'll want it more. They don't have protective factors in their cerebral cortex yet, because their low brain is so vulnerable to want it, and they will drive you crazy, and you will give it to them, and you will need more and more and more courage to say no. And by the time they're 5 years old, the kindergarten teacher will go, how do I control this kid? Because self-regulation and self-direction is not what is being learned. Self-direction and self-regulation at 18 months is being learned when they're running around not being self-directed. So, you can see I get a little upset about this. Because timeliness and what the brain science says, we can go through every age or stage of development, and maybe we'll have time to do that to a degree, and say, what are the key things here that you want to watch out for in your relationship with screen technologies with your child? And that we'll look at when we look at the brain science, but we've got to bring the brain science into the mix and understand that when you understand the brain science, it can be so much easier to make the decisions that will be the best for your child with digital devices. The last is, of course, that industry culture, and I talked enough about that. It's always there, it's always pervasive, and it will want you to do things. It will say, oh, you'll read something in the paper, and it will say, well, this is not what Gloria said, you know, this is, everything's okay, everything's fine. Who owns the paper? Who owns the people who own the paper? We can't, this confusion, misinformation, and half-right information, someday I want to write an article about this, or a part of a book, or whatever, is the same. You could go back to an article from 1970 about television, right? Oh, it's, you know, there's those problems with it. Oh, but it's good. You know, there's so many good things about it, because you learn from Sesame Street, and they get this, and they get that, so everything's fine. So they start out with, oh, kids who watch too much TV, you know, are more obese, or this happens, or this. Okay. Then, oh, but these things they can learn. So everything's fine. What we have to do is think about, there's always two sides, right? There's always negative and there's always positive. Every technology, anything really, has both sides to it. So what I want to be able to do, which I haven't easily over 20 years of doing this, whenever I talk about the negative, then they think, oh, I don't know about the positive. I do know about the positive. I love the technology. I love being able to see my nephew on Facebook and growing up because he's 2,000 miles away. I love that. I love being able to have colleagues in Kenya
or Dubai, China. I love that. It isn't an either or, it's both and. So when we look at it, we could pretend to have two baskets here. And this is actually an activity you might want to do with your children. I suggested it for the middle school and high school, and if you have older kids, it might be good, or it could be good for even little ones because it's a concrete experience. So you get two lovely baskets, Easter baskets or a gardening basket, or just some baskets that you love. And over a period of a few weeks, you have every member of the family, one basket is going to be for the not so good things, the negative things. And one basket is going to be for the good things. Okay? So in this basket, you might put, okay, the bad thing is we're around media is we're not eating dinner as a family as much as I want. Okay? The good thing is that we did decide to get a cell phone, not a smartphone, but a cell phone, so our daughter at 9 years old can call us in emergency. That's a good thing. And you could put in the things that you appreciate in the good basket about your children, what you appreciate about yourself, your strengths as a parent. You could put in your values in the good basket. In the bad basket, you put the things that you need to talk about, you need to work on, the things that are bugging you, the negative. And this is always the reality. The two baskets are always our reality. There's always good that we can look at in life, and if we went through and talked with each of you individually and myself, we would have a bunch of problems and anxieties, a lot of problems, from health of relatives to elder care to worries that are really real, that are suffering, because life is about suffering. You can't take that away. Where do we put our focus? How do we get through the suffering? We take the good, we take the strengths, we take what's working and use it to address the challenges. We know who we are, we know what we're about, and we know what's working and what our strengths are. When we're clear on that, we can use those strengths, those resources that we have inside of us and around us and with our families to address the negative, to address the challenges, the problems. One question I really like is a question to ask ourselves as families. What do we want our family to feel like? What do we want our family life to feel like? Does it feel like it's always contentious and there's always, oh, we always have to worry about this? Or is there ease around screen technologies and digital devices? Or is there a lot of joy and vitality and aliveness in the family? Before I had kids, I really wanted two things. One, I wanted a lot of noise and a lot of creativity. I wanted easels up and places for painting and places for crafts and music if they wanted, whatever they wanted. Creative expression is really important to me. And I wanted my family to feel like that, to feel that they could go different areas of the home and do different things. The other is I wanted people, their peers to come over to our side for a while, you know. And that happened to more or less a degree because when they went over to their friends, of course, they watched movies and played video games they weren't supposed to play at our house, right? And they'll do that. But when their friends came over, my husband and I had gone through, various meetings, and we did things with the kids outside of screen technology because we knew they were getting it other places. And at first, my sons didn't like that. I have two sons, 21 months apart, and they didn't like that. Mom, they're not gonna want to come over if we can't play the video game, or we can't do this, can't do that. I go, well, let's just try it. So my husband is a scientist, a rocket engineer. It is rocket science sometimes to him. Even loading the dishwasher has to be done in a certain way. I've learned to understand it a little. But anyway, he was very good at making treasure hunts with a treasure map, Google, and placing these around the house and in the yard. And even even when they were 12 and 13, they loved it. He built a tree house in the backyard and had the boys help him build a tree house, and then of course the guys liked that. And so there were things that we did intentionally that took time, but there was aliveness. And the referent for a living system is aliveness. What makes you become fully alive is a famous quote, remember, I forget by who, but what makes your family feel alive and fulfilled and vital? And that's why I call my Vital 5 vital. So that's, now, so if we think about, okay, what is the most vital thing we can do? What's alive? What do we want? Who are we? Who do we want our kids to become? Then we can start looking at the relevant information around the industry culture, the brain science, your reality, and the child's reality. This synthesis has taken me 25 years, but I think it's good. I hope you agree. I'm going to say it. It's my talent. I love it. Okay. The first thing are the guidelines. I find it fascinating that the American Academy of Pediatrics has not changed their guideline yet. There's so much pressure to do so. Parents are using cell phones and iPhones with babies. Now the median age to start screen technology is 9 months by the parents. Yet, recommendation, no screen at all. That means no iPhones. No iPhones to give a baby in the back seat when you're putting groceries in the trunk. No iPads for toddlers when you're out to dinner so they can watch a cartoon or a movie. And a lot of people interpret this, no screen technologies from birth to age 2, age 2, but it's actually through age 2. 36 months on the planet is a good time to begin if you want to begin. Why are they saying this? Because the screen is a two-dimensional object. It's a flat surface. Young children need three-dimensional reality, as I gave the example of the 18-month-old. When I give workshops for parents or educators, I sometimes give a percentage. Like tomorrow, I'm going to talk to parents just of young children, and some of you might have young children. But I like to think of, if we do have to not agree with this, then I say the least amount of time. 5%, 3% of the child's time. If you give them a screen, they will want it more. That is a given. And then it becomes much harder to say no. And yeah, they'll operate it fine. They'll push, they can do this and this and this and swipe and do this and learn, and they'll learn on it. I have no doubt about that, they'll learn. But the brain of the young baby and the young child is hardwired to learn by concrete, by feeling the actual three-dimensional object and putting that block on top and that block on top and pushing it and seeing how it works. Or pouring the water in the pail in the sand and understanding how these things work. The screen is taking the child away from the concrete experiences. You might have heard of Piaget's famous line, concrete before abstractions. And we don't think of the screen because we can hold it as an abstraction to a child. It is, in the sense of, it isn't that they're manipulating, the reality they're manipulating is on a screen. It isn't in three-dimensional reality. And we can ask questions about this in just a little bit. I'll stop and we can talk more detail about it. But America, if you go on their website and look up, they have not changed this recommendation, and I'm very proud of them that they haven't. I know that this is the best way to do it, to raise babies and young children. And if I told you anything else, I wouldn't be in my integrity as a researcher and as an educator. No matter what the industry culture gives us, no matter what technologies they give us, we can't change it. We can't change what the mammalian brain needs. So we're taking a risk. Now, remember, the baskets and each of our children are unique, so maybe it won't affect them adversely as much as it might another child. I'm talking about the research on large populations and the trends. Using screen technology in early childhood before the age of 3 is a risk factor. You're giving yourself a risk factor rather than a protective factor. If you don't use screen technology from babyhood through age 2 and wait until 3, then you are giving yourself and you're giving the child a protective factor. The brain has now grown in the way it was meant to grow. And introducing an iPad at age 3 is much, much more sane. And even then, I would keep it very limited. The American Academy of Pediatrics says ages 4 to 6, and I guess you could say 3 to 6, 1 to 2 hours a day of screen technology. So when we think about screen technology, define it a little bit. It's a video, possibly, that we put on for them to watch, a documentary we might watch, they might watch for school, television programs that they love, movies that they're downloading. Then we have, and that's one kind of category of entertainment, using the screens as toys. And I love it that way. I mean, we have our favorite, my husband and I have our favorite programs and series and so forth, Netflix series and movies. I love movies. The second one is the interactive aspect. So how many apps are they, how many games are they playing, and that's a learning tool possibly. It can also be a game, but yet a game can be creative and they're learning from it. And so, but that would be counted within this time as screen time because they're on a screen. They're not playing chess with the chess pieces on a board. They're playing chess on a screen. And for children under the age of 12, there is a difference for them. It isn't concrete, especially before the age of 7, but even 7 to 12. But 4 to 6, then let's talk about the third category for a minute, and then I'll recap them. The third category of screens, right, are the interactive social media. Are they on social media? Are they texting friends? Are they relating to friends through screen technology? In other words, not seeing their friends face to face, but relating so that's impacting their socialization. I do think we can use screen technology to help them socialize and learn socialization cues, but kids under the age of 12 certainly need a lot of what we used to call just getting together. We have now FaceTime. They need FaceTime a lot. They need to read the cues of other people in a way that you can't any other way. Maybe you've read the recent article in Forbes magazine on April 3rd. It came out. Siri, you're ruining a generation of kids. Did you read that? What it's about is about kids that start talking to Siri get mad. First they like Siri, they start talking, and then they get mad at Siri, and it's like they start yelling, no, you didn't get it right, this is not good, you don't know, no Siri, no, oh Siri's so dumb. And the researcher, one of the researchers at the University of Washington said, well, because the kids aren't getting the emotional their needs met as an adult would, read the context, or even other children that they talk to will read the context of what they're saying, in their mannerism, their eyes, even the tone of inflection in a voice is much different than writing it on a screen. So the presence of our human makeup, all that makes us human, and our intricate interactions, Siri can't read that yet. And I've gotten mad at Siri myself. I mean, I realized, and they didn't mention that, where she's just not giving the information and she thinks she knows it all. I mean, there's this attitude I just didn't like. So, anyway, talking to robots, now we have to think about, how do our children talk to robots, and what do they learn about themselves when they do? Part of the researchers' concerns are that by, in 5 or 10 years, but even less maybe, who knows, 3-year-old could have their own robot and be bossing the robot around. Then they're saying, yeah, the slave-master relationship is ingrained in the child's emotional makeup, if that happens. So then we'll have to be talking, maybe you'll bring me back 10 years from now and I'll say, don't get a robot for your child until your child is at least 12, and follow these guidelines for how to talk to your robot. We laugh now, but who knows, right? We'll have to teach kids how to talk to their robots so they don't get into a master-slave relationship with them and start dominating from the very beginning. Oh my gosh, this looks easy, doesn't it? And you'll say, oh, I'm so glad I raised my kids when all I had to worry about were cell phones, digital devices, iPads. And like I say, all I had to worry about were video games, not too nasty like the ones now, and VCRs, you know, that's all I had to worry about. Ages 7 through 12, 2 to 3 hours a day outside of school and homework research. And this is the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation. What I like to think about is a weekly diet of screen technology, because, you know, some days you're sick and got the flu and the kids watch a whole day of video. That's reality, folks. And then it's like, oh my God, 2 to 3 hours, this was not 2 to 3 hours, and I've been sick for 2 days and they must have amassed 16 hours. Okay, well, we could stay calm and say, all right, well, what are we going to do this weekend? How can we go on a little trip, go to the park if I feel better, or do something outside of screen technology since they had so much? Or are they old enough now, can they write a little essay about what they learned about this great day of watching all day long, and what they enjoyed, and do they feel tired? Are they tired out when they're in front of the screen? What I like to think about, any kind of activity we give our children, we're helping them think about their thinking about it. Oops. I went back. How did I do that? I just started talking with my hands with this in. My gosh. There we go. This is the right one. So the benefits are many, and before the benefits, there's the research, and I think that this is important information. There's masses of research that won't be out in mainstream media, and you have to search the dusty shelves of Google now instead of the dusty shelves of college libraries. Children and teens who have less screen time get better grades at school, across the board. They use screen technology as educational tools. In other words, they are more in charge of it. It's maybe a little bit of a paradox, but you reduce screen technology in childhood, and as they grow, they learn to be in control of it, because you're growing a self-identity within the child that says, you're in control of this, and you're smarter than anything you see or read anyway. You know, you're as smart as this, and you can figure it out. Your life is a whole life. You are a whole child, not only a tech child, you're an artistic child. You are a child who appreciates nature. You're a child who knows how to sit and have adult conversation around a family table. And you don't need to be entertained by a screen and just disappear from the family culture. You have many facets of yourself, and the tech facet is one facet of who you are, and hey, you're really good at it. You learn to stay in control. You balance their lives, of course, and there's no need for the addiction. And once an addiction sets in, believe me, I work with a lot of parents of teens who have a real addiction. These kids have real addictions to video games especially. Violent video games especially. And that's what I have, that's what got me to China in the first place 3 years ago, was that they asked me to come in to talk about and work with some people. The addiction piece is growing. 1 in 11 teens in the US are addicted to video games, violent video games. 1 in 11. And that is about 3 million kids. Now, if we had a disease that 3 million kids were having, we would have a national campaign against it. This is a hidden addiction. A lot of people don't know about it. You can prevent this addiction by these guidelines, and again, taking it in a gentle way with ourselves, a weekly diet, so that we can be realistic about our lives. But little ways we can reduce the screen technologies. The kids don't need to be on their cell phone when you're transporting them or on a screen. Put it away. You can have a conversation with them. They can listen. It's even better for young children and children under the age of 12 to be listening to audio stories than watching DVD when you go on trips. And I'll explain why when we get to the brain piece, but it's so much better for their language and their critical thinking development, because they have to think and listen in different ways when it's only the auditory processing and not the visual. They're in a visual world enough. Their lives are externalized on a screen enough, so we can counteract that with audio stories. And there are other ways too, but what we will see is that our children then will teach their children the same, and we can grow in wisdom as humanity grows with technology and not live for it. Let's take a few questions now, and even though I haven't gotten through all I would like to before the questions, let's see. And I think we have do you want to come up here, or do you want to give the... Okay, they're going to give you a mic, I think, so everyone can hear you.
My question is are kids, like if we spend all this time really being proactive with our kids and really restricting games and the type of games they play, I guess my thought is what happens when they go off to college, and are they less likely to get addicted at that point, or is that just, we just hope that they learn good habits?
Okay, I think it's a great question. We want them to learn great habits, and what we want to think about is that how old are the children that you're talking about, because before the age of 11 to 12, the cortex, the thinking function, doesn't have enough oomph, it doesn't have enough in place to protect from the low brain reactivity. So our low brain, the seat of our impulsivity and where we get the stimulus response with a video game, especially a fast-paced video game, is being overactivated at the low brain level. After the age of 12, you're home free, in a sense, that if ideally, let's just say this is in a utopian society and can't ever happen now, keeping kids away from video games before they're 12 would mean we would reduce the addiction almost entirely. Because the brain stem at age 12 now is not going to be vulnerable to the addiction. It would be less likely, especially if this child is reading well, loves to read, goes on trips with their families, has experiences, has talents, is building their talents, and what my kids did, of course they played them, but they would say, well, we don't get this game, all you do is shoot people and it's not fun. And so then their mind is, and they want to do a sports game or a game that is strategy, a slower moving software game, or an app game, and they're not addicted to it. That they can take it or leave it because it's very hard to addict to a cortical activity. Okay, so we don't addict, people say they're addicted to reading. You don't see very many people. Now, sometimes kids really get into reading and they read every minute of the day, but they're not going to be addicted in a way of reading 13, 15 hours a day, like these addictions for video games. You don't get addicted to playing chess unless you're a chess master and you have to play it in 8 to 10 hours a day, every day, day in and day out in order to grow it. You don't get addicted to cortical activities easily. You have to use a lot of discipline to use your thinking function. Anything that's slow moving in terms of thought processes is hard to get addicted to. What you get addicted to is a quick response and immediate feedback, which apps and video games give a lot. You get an immediate feedback and you get a stimulus to move forward. Now, in my book, Stop Teaching Our Kids to Kill, it's misnomer, and I didn't want to name it that, but it is a call to action against media violence. And I revised it totally and completely for an August release in August 2014. And I put a chapter in about identity, how at different ages and stages this kind of stimulus response will impact the kid's identity. Because the other part here is not only cognitively, but in the limbic system, the midbrain is where we hold our identity, in our feeling state. It's not in our thinking. That's why kids who are traumatized in the early years or who have abuse grow up thinking they're not worthy. Their feeling level, they don't feel good about themselves. So what we have with fast-paced video games is that they can't learn about themselves as a learner. They can't learn about themselves that I can persevere through this multiple four-step process and think through this and come out the other side of it. I know I can do that. Because learning is often a slow process. Yes, you can have flashcards and you can have memory, but to learn the three-step math problem, to learn to go through this process, it's a process that's missing. See, life is a process. Life is slow. Now we put life on a screen, but every time it's on a screen, it's fast. And it can give the kids math problems and all these scenarios and these problems to solve that we can't come up fast enough with all the creative ideas the apps can give our kids. And a lot of kids with special needs, have access, rather than us doing those worksheets, they have access immediately on the screen to all of these fabulous activities and problem-solving activities. That is good. Keep that in the good basket. We're not saying to get rid of that. We're saying that they need other things too. And now I'm just talking about habituation or addiction through the video game especially. And if they're using their mind, I guess the bottom line is, if they're using their mind, they're less likely to be addicted. And so to answer this, the risk of addiction is coming before the age of 12. And our goal, I think, as parents, is to get as many developmental needs met, before they enter teenagehood. Then they have protective factors against it. And my hope was they would rather read and they would rather do things in college. They're not gonna just go and because the fruit, the forbidden fruit was denied. We won't deny it, they'll still play a little bit, And what we want to do is by the time they're 18 or before, 15 would be great, is that before they write their college essay, that they see that this is only a small part of their life, and it's not that important. You know, it's important, but it's not everything. Everything is, oh yeah, I want to be a doctor. Everything is, yeah, I really want to major in biology, or yeah, that's where more of everything ought to be, rather than in the video game.
What are your thoughts on using screen time as a currency? You know, if you do all these chores, you get 30 minutes, or you do homework.
Oh. You can tell. Okay, I suggest, first of all, reading about intrinsic motivation, and then you can make a determination. Alfie Kohn had a book out about a decade ago, and his last name is Kohn, Punished by Rewards. Alfie Kohn, Punished by Rewards. Now, he took his work from the masters in intrinsic motivation, are Edward D.C., D-E-C-I, and Richard Ryan, R-Y-A-N. Richard Ryan and Edward D.C. have written scholarly books and have done 30 years of research on intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. What our goal, I believe, is that we want the kids to read because they love to, from the inside out. Beverly Cleary, famous child's author from a while back, said, reading is its own reward. If we set a contingency, now here's how kids think, different than adults think, right? If we set this contingency and we say, okay, if you read more, you can get more screen time. Okay? If you read this for 20 minutes, you can get 20 minutes of screen time. When the child is reading, because reading is harder, reading takes more imagination, reading is a learning, slow learning process for children. They're reading, but guess what they're thinking about? They're thinking about getting on the screen. They're thinking about, oh, I can't wait, while they're reading. So we take their focus from their process of reading and enjoying reading to using reading as a stepping stone, as a way to get what they really want, the sugar cube. This is the sugar cube, okay? There's a difference between sugar cane and sugar cubes, isn't there? And I put this in my new book. Actually, it was my husband's idea. I better give him credit. The video, the technology, is a sugar cube. It's immediate. But you chew on sugar cane, and you've got to work hard to get it. And that is the difference here, where we want our kids to get a process, to understand how to be in a process of learning and enjoying themselves in that process, because it's in the process that they learn about themselves as a learner. They learn who they are. They learn what they're capable of. They learn what their weaknesses are. And this is what they need when they go to college. They learn to know, yeah, I'm just not good at that, but I've been trying and I see over the years I've gotten better. Or, hey, this comes naturally to me, or I'm good at this. They can't learn that unless they're in a process of reading, focused on reading, and enjoying reading for its own sake. So that gets us back to guidelines and contingencies. I believe as parents we have our authority, it's authentic, it's right, we set the guidelines. And there are consequences, logical, for not fulfilling the guidelines. Not saying you get extra hours for doing this. Now, there's another way to give extra hours that's a little trickier, that isn't set up as a contingency. And it's like, okay, you know, you spent all day gardening with me, didn't you? Gosh, you worked really hard. And we enjoyed it, we were tired. Boy, when I'm feeling tired and all, I'd like to sit back and watch a good movie. Would you like to watch a good movie now? As a way to relax after all that gardening? Sure, Mom. What we're doing is, we're not saying you do this and we do this. We're finessing it a little more. This is like the reading teacher who might say, okay, a pizza party, when you read this book and write your report, we get a pizza party. Oh gosh, everybody's reading, they want to get to the pizza party. That's a contingency. No, here's another way to do it. Oh, we're reading this new Bear Award winner, and you know what we're going to do after we read it? we're going to dress up like the characters and enjoy having a little get-together. You know, if it seems like it will work out, let's wait and just see. Oh, what will we do? Oh, well, you know, we'll all play our favorite character. You'll write a little dialogue about the character, and we might bring in some pizza, who knows what. Oh, really? Yes, we might do it. I'm going to think about it. I want to see how well you read it, but let's just focus on the book for now. You know, let's just read this, and this is a wonderful book, and so they still have that carried out there, but it's in a different way. Better yet is not even tell them. Not even tell them. Just, we're reading the book. Oh, everybody did such a great job. I loved your essays. You know what we're going to do tomorrow? We're going to just bring in some pizza and relax. We are? Yeah, we are. So there's these gradations of the carrot. Yes?
I guess my corollary is about punishment.
Yes.
Good.
So,
my corollary is, I would never extend the hours. But mine is, I use it as a punishment. So, well, because you made a bad choice, you know, if you choose to do that, then you choose not to have your iPad this afternoon. What are your thoughts about that?
using it as a punishment. So it's a contingency too.
Yes.
If they did something bad with the iPad, like one of my clients that I was coaching, two sons, middle school, 11 and 14 about, and she wasn't home at the time, and they didn't, you know, they were watching YouTube, and it was some weird YouTube where they start throwing food all over the place. So they got out in the refrigerator and they started doing the same thing. You think 11-year-olds would know better, but they don't. And they start doing a food fight imitating the YouTube people. Well, they didn't know Mom was going to come home earlier. Mom didn't know it, but Mom drove up, saw this mess and said, you know what? You saw that on YouTube, you used your iPad. No iPad for a month. Because this is not the appropriate use of the iPad. So if it can be a logical consequence if it's related to the screen technology. But, oh, you were late coming home from Boy Scouts and you weren't supposed to stop at your friend's house, no screen technology for a week. No, it isn't related to it. So logical consequences have to feel logical to the child. They may seem logical to us. I mean, this is totally logical for us. But it isn't to them. It has to relate to it. So, okay, so you were irresponsible coming home. What could you do to show me your responsibility this week? I want you to think about that and come up with an idea that you could, you can redeem your responsibility, and I want you to write a page on how you're going to do this differently next time. So there's a sort of punishment, but its logical consequence is much better than punishment, or in a sense of taking the screen away. The more you take it away, the more they'll want.
The only thing that is my son is in therapy. That's a long story. The therapist, I'm like, well, what do I do? And she said, well, what is his favorite thing? And I mean, I said to her, it has no logical connection.
Oh.
But it's the thing that would be the most punishment. And when I asked, she said, no, they say, have the conversation with him. What would you, okay, you did this. What do you think your punishment? He will say, no iPad.
Okay, if he says it, that's fine. How old is he?
He's fine.
Okay, okay. So he knows already. He knows already. So if the child says it, that's a good way to do it too. If the child says it, and they think it's logical, but they're already seeing themselves. My concern there is that he's seeing himself as not capable of controlling the iPad himself. And at 5, he can't control it himself, but I want to instill from as early on that you can control it yourself. So maybe working with him on, okay, I'll take it away this time, but I want to understand how you're going to control it. Tell me what works for you to control it. See what he says. Who knows? He might be. Okay. A few more specific questions. And this gets, hopefully, to help others too.
Well, and this is a random one, but I know with neuroscience getting so advanced and so many more people studying brain chemistry, there's a lot of scans on the brain now where you can see addictions and you can actually
Yes.
see the map on the brain and hotspots or whatever else. Is there anything that's been done on this where you can see differences on the brain at kids at different levels?
At different levels, I do have several scans I could show now, if that, does that seem appropriate? If I can go back and forth on my clicker here. So, okay. This is one brain scan of an 18-month-old Romanian orphan on the right, and on the left, a healthy 18-month-old. And what it is taking the top of the cerebral cortex and showing where all of the areas of the black area are neural networks that haven't been formed yet. And on the left, you see there are neural networks that aren't formed, but not as many. When we talk about this abused brain, this was a baby in Romania who's in an orphanage who wasn't cuddled, who wasn't held, and didn't get the kind of bonding and attachment they needed with the adult, with the baby caregiver or parent. The parent wasn't available, and the caregivers didn't know. They didn't know that you touch the child. You need to physically touch babies and toddlers in order to grow their brain. That is brain science. You can't just leave them and not touch them, not hold them, not cuddle them. You have to touch them. And so the other area, the pink, shows where the activity is taking place. In the child that wasn't touched, and we could say it's basically an abused brain, we have the pink area on the back. So the low brain is hyperactivated. The cortical function on the front is underactivated, whereas in the 18-month-old you have the, the activation is going on. They're thinking, they're trying to explore their world and think and grow, and that would be the way we would want it. The other one I have is on violence and media violence. These are just research articles on the 1 in 11 kids are addicted, and I can email it to Laura or to someone if you want these. This comes out of Indiana University. So kids who already had high exposure to media violence on the right were not using as much. The green parts were using the cortex, using the thinking function when they were playing a violent video game. So you see, when you put the protective factor in place on supporting the thinking function, then you do that, and I'll get right back to you in just a minute. And then the low media violence exposure, there is a lot of cortical functioning going on, even while playing the video game. The low media violence exposure also supports logical decision-making activity. And you see the high media violence exposure, where is the activity on logical decision-making? It's almost non-existent. This is seminal studies, and as you said, there are more coming out all the time. A lot of these researchers, though, are suppressed. They are, and they're bought out. Now, I'll tell you 2 researchers, if you're interested in media violence, I'll tell you 3 of the best, purest, highest integrity researchers. 2 are at Iowa State University, and Anderson is his last name. Anderson and Doug Gentile, Gentile, and why can't I think of his first name? Anderson. Anderson is the lead, and Gentile is his associate, and they have been doing seminal research on media violence. The other is Brad Bushman. I think he's at the University of Michigan, I'm not sure where, but Brad Bushman is doing a lot on desensitization and how media violence desensitizes kids. There are 4 basic effects of media violence, and we can talk about those if you like, but Yeah, the research is pretty clear. Yes, you were going to say something on this.
Can we get specific with the video games on media violence? I have a 7-year-old, and he really likes Minecraft.
Oh, sure.
And that's primarily what he and his buddies play,
Mhm.
you know, and I have a 20-minute limit on that.
Fabulous.
Forget about that. But you keep referring to this media violence and these video games. Well, can you get specific, like what specific games are
Okay,
they watching?
so-
Because
Sure.
they have birthday parties now with game trucks where they, and I don't know exactly what they're like.
I know.
Game trucks.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that specifically? What should we be looking out for?
Yeah.
What are these video games that are so?
I will. Minecraft is obviously a creative game for kids to be playing, and it's addictive in another way because it's so creative and they're doing so many things. So you have to, you know, limit it so they do life. And one of my clients that I worked with, actually she's in Brazil, but she had the same problem. This is a worldwide problem. And her 7- and 9-year-old were playing a lot of Minecraft. And she came up with a creative idea in that she had them make the characters from Minecraft that they were creating on Minecraft, actually make them like out of paper dolls or clay or different activities for art activities. So then they played in their imagination scenario. They played in their imagination in 3-dimensional reality, even though they were sometimes imitating the Minecraft experiences. They also were adding to it, and they were using Minecraft as a jump-off place to be in 3D reality. And I thought that is a great thing because they're learning to be in control of it, and they're learning so much by supporting themselves with more creativity and in the 3-dimensional world. There are 30 video games that are kind of no-nos, and I don't want to give all of them at this point. You can, again, I can get the link. They're listed on a place called Kids Spot, and I found this and I thought, oh, this is a great tool. I had my list of about 10. But I'll give you an overview of what they are. Some of them, like Mortal Kombat or Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, Gears of War, these Grand Theft Auto, I know that Grand Theft Auto is sometimes popular with 7- and 8-year-olds. I think that you've got to play these games if your kids have them and you haven't played them. Only 2% of parents actually play the games that kids have. And this is one of my missions next. This has got to stop. We've got to play the games. And you've got to play them to get to a level or two above. Because, you know, Call of Duty has an operation in one of its upper levels where a child explodes. And you don't see that, and what they've been doing, what the game developers have been doing, is putting fairly benign images in the lower levels. And then the kids get to the upper levels and they see this. So taking time to rent a game, there are rental places, instead of buying it and actually play it. I don't think any of these are appropriate for kids, and I even question whether they're appropriate for teens because of, you know, they're basically rehearsing murder. They're murder rehearsals. They are murdering all the time. And now they're dismembering. Assassin's Creed and several others are just grotesque. I had to research these for the new edition of the book, and I hated it. It was just awful. There's dismemberment in slow motion. And so you get to see you're stabbing the person, and you get to see the body parts float and dismember. Or you kill a cat or a dog in the same way. So they're using graphic, it's very, it's like a movie, really. It's very clear. And when in '99, it was basically Duke Nukem and blowing people up and blowing up animals. And and now it's more slow motion killing and torturing. In one of the Grand Theft Autos, you have to it's Call of Duty, you have to waterboard, no, I think it's Grand Theft Auto. You have to actually go through a torturing technique to get to the next level. You have to torture somebody while they're screaming out in pain and saying, stop it, and you keep torturing them. Grand Theft Auto calls, there's a scene in Grand Theft Auto where you're driving along in the Santa Barbara Mountains, it looks like, right? And Steve Winwood comes on the radio, it's a great day, whatever. And then there's an announcement on the radio saying, let's use your woman as a urinal. Things like that. It's very misogynist. Very, very. So the one that was popular with 8-year-old boys across the nation, the version of Grand Theft Auto was the prostitute in the car shaking up and down, and the car would shake up and down, and you know what they were doing, right? And then he gets out of the car, she gets out of the car, and he says, I'm done with you, babe. Shoots her. That was popular with 8-year-old boys. So parents can't be watching these, I don't think, or playing them, and to really understand what's going on. You get extra points for headshots. Of course, Adam Lanza shot his mother in the head 4 times before he went to Sandy Hook. And every one that I researched between Sandy Hook and the time I wrote the book was 44 school massacres, all but, I don't know, 5 or 10 headshots. I'm trying to show in the book that there is this pattern of headshots, and headshots are what the video game gives you extra points for. Remember, it's never one thing. And in media violence, there are risk factors. There are about 7 or 10 risk factors that are important to think about. Let's see if I even put them in here. No. Mental illness and media violence and guns, obviously, access to weapons, are the top 3. But media violence has moved up from 8 or 9 to 3rd one, according to the National Science Foundation study of February 2013. Media violence will affect kids who all have high-risk factors. So there's other high-risk factors, and in combination with media violence or playing these violent video games, they start to see their identity as a killer. It's pretty clear if we understand how self-identity grows, and if they're doing this 8, 10, 12 hours a day, practicing, if they're angry, if they have no outlet, and obviously they have other risk factors, a lot of times mental illness. I just read a study that 1 in 5 young men deployed to Iraq were mentally ill, were considered mentally ill. 1 in 5. So when they come back, that came out with the Fort Hood shootings. So, yes.
How do you have any tips for young parents who just cannot? My ex-husband buys babysitter T14 for blood and violence, and he has 657 How do you have tips?
Yeah, let's look at the brain, and let's look at that, and maybe the slow brain. And so your son is 5, and he's been playing some violent video games.
We don't have live TV in my house, so it's not, that's not a worry in my house, but.
When he goes to his father's house, and I had a similar worry, one of the things you can do is immediately when he comes home, have a snack or a real nurturing kind of environment and talk to him about, allow him to get out what he's been seeing and doing. Because young children cannot handle these images. This is like it's really there for them. Their brains are entirely vulnerable to these horrific images. So keeping an open space and talking to the children about what they're doing. The other, so let's just see if there's
I think we have one more question.
one more question, then I'll go back to my sequence and give you the tips, the working knowledge.
I want to go back to the Minecraft question.
Oh, sure.
Asked because it is very creative, but there is a survival mode where there are like these creepers and these other things that have to be killed with swords, right? So there's a component of it that is violent, and I think what is too violent? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Can you not do the sword part? Can you limit it?
Yeah, you can.
creative.
The survival piece. I learned that they put that in recently. I mean, it wasn't like part of the original Minecraft, was it? Was it? I don't know.
I mean,
Okay.
we just came to Minecraft in the last 6 months. But I wonder if maybe it's in your book or if there's a reference to, I mean, is it just, there should be none of that, none? Or is like, in my mind, I do play the game. And I don't like the creepers, and I'd like to shut down the survival mode if I can figure out how to do that. But the reality is that they live, they see some of it around. And I'm not talking about shooting somebody in the head. The Minecraft, and I'm not defending it. I want to explore this issue.
Okay.
They don't look like humans. It doesn't look real, but I find it still concerning. And so, is it just none? You just have to totally say no, doesn't matter how abstract it is. And then on that note, then if the children are playing, Knight and whatever, or Star Wars, or Lego Star Wars, like in my mind, there are a lot of nuances. Maybe this is not the subject of maybe that's too outside what you want to talk about, but.
Okay, I believe there are nuances. How old are the kids?
My son is 7.
Okay.
And then we have younger children that don't play it at all.
Okay.
But
When did he start playing it?
Minecraft?
Yes, the
About
survival
6 months
mode.
ago. About 6
Okay,
months
so
ago.
he was 7 then, or 6?
He was 6 and a half.
Okay, so so let's talk about violent play and how kids do violent play. And, I didn't originally have guns for my 2 to 4-year-olds. But they made a peanut butter sandwich out of a gun. I found it under the couch. And it was not pretty. So, water pistols, okay, and this kind of thing. They made swords. They never saw Star Wars, but somehow they played it and they acted it out. They were too young, but they knew about it. It was in the water, in the osmosis of the collective field. And so boys will act out that aggression. How do you want them to act it out? Do you want them to act it out with somebody else's script on a Minecraft is one question. Or do you want them to act it out with their script, with what they think they should do to the enemy in an imagination scenario that they create? Now there's a complexity here to add a layer to it. If they're playing Minecraft, and they act out the violence there, then they will more likely imitate Minecraft when they're playing in 3-dimensional scenarios. Because children have, the visual screen is like a tsunami on their own imaginative abilities. So I could just say a movie title or a book title like Gone with the Wind is an old one, but if I say Gone with the Wind and you've seen the movie, you'll see an image from the movie, even if you've read the book. Even for adult minds, the visual outweighs our own imaginative capacities. So if a child is immersed and playing even for 20 minutes into Minecraft, it is going to influence to more or less a degree when they go and play their violent scenario when they're playing. That's one thing to consider. The other is that the script is developed by adults for kids who say, you come into this reality, and here is what you do, and here are your constraints. Every app, every video game has constraints that the child can't get out of in their own imaginative capacities. The only constraint is the limit to their own imagination. And it's an open space. the open space idea is more in alignment with what we want to have for children under the age of 10 or 11, in the fact that they can then practice thinking out of the box. We don't know. Even though the people on Minecraft, they're not real people, they don't look like real people, they're stabbing them and they're sorting them, skewering them as a way for their own survival. I have a problem with this at 6 and 7 years old. I may not have a problem at 12, depending on their habits of mind. But the problem I have at 6 or 7 years old is that they are getting into a modality of domination in order to survive. This is a nuance that they are learning, that they do this, and they hurt other people in order for themselves to survive. It's a theme that I hate in video games, and it's domination. And I have juxtaposed the research with cyberbullying and bullying. We have such this explosion of bullying, and we're wondering where it's coming from. And yes, the anonymous nature of social media, all these things. But you know what? You gotta look at what the games the kids are playing. It's going to impact the mind of a child in a lot of different ways. Their brains are like wet cement. It just, whatever goes in will mold it. This is it's a fragile, delicate nature. Brain development is a very serious concern. So as they're growing at 6, 7, they can't resist this imprinting that's going on. They don't have the cognitive function yet to imprint it, to resist the imprint. At 12, they have enough experiences to know this isn't a real person, this doesn't look real, I'm stabbing, but it's not real. By 12, they do, but at 6 and 7, their cognitive function is much more limited. It's a different brain at age 12. So they may say they know. Sure, they know at the level of their knowing. But they don't know it the way a 12-year-old knows it or the way an adult knows it. And it's going to impact. So I would watch, that's why I do coaching, because there's no easy thing. It's nuanced and there's a system. So I would watch, and observe your son and see what he says, how he says it, what he does, what his attitudes are, if there's a change, if you're concerned, if he's more aggressive, if he's, when he plays with other people, if he pushes and shoves, if he feels like he has to control them, then you're seeing some of that coming out. Because it will come out. If it's affecting them, it will come out. Brain changes equal behavior changes. Whenever something is happening in the brain, it will come out in child's behavior. And they won't be able to regulate themselves as easily with this kind of play either. Another point here is that when they're playing in their own made-up imagination, whether it's violent or whatever, they have to stop. There's two things going on. One is the play, and the other is like the stage was, oh, now we're going to do this. Now I got to do this. Now I got to get my cape, or I got to go do this. And they have a metacognitive aspect going on. It's slow. The imaginative play scenario in three-dimensional reality is slower than the imaginative play on a screen. It just is. That's the way these things are set up. You can't put life on a screen. Life is different. Life is slower. We can see a movie, we can see the changes, but if we would live that, it would take a long time to live that fabulous movie we've seen. Right? It's always going to be faster in many different ways. And so when we put a game on a screen, it's a very different experience for the child than if they're playing it in three-dimensional reality. And one of the major differences is this ability for his metacognition and his own thinking function to kick in more when he's in the three-dimensional reality, where so much is happening, he has to make decisions quicker. There isn't time to do it, and he certainly doesn't have the cortex at age 6 or 7 to do it. Lots to think about. Lots to think about, and it's it's like how do I put this all in one book. You know, like in Parenting Well, I focused on the Vital Five, which you're doing anyway probably, but it's really a way to support. It's not addressing the digital issue questions right on. It's saying, these are protective factors, these 5 developmental needs. If you do these, then the kids can resist media, they can address it. But there needs to be, all of these nuanced kinds of things need to be talked about, I think, because they're so important. And I'm glad you asked that question. Okay.
I'm a single father. I've got a student, a son that's doing well in school. I played this Minecraft with him, which apparently all these kids were playing. I said, well, how creative. He's building a house and planting a garden, and there's a couple zombies that crawl around. I mean, I grew up in Belo Horizonte, you know, area. So, I mean,
yeah, sure.
It didn't seem that bad to me. So apparently there's more to this game than the
Was
20
he
minutes
stabbing
I played
those
with it.
zombies?
Well, I didn't see any stabbing, I just saw
He's
that they
got
caught.
to kill the zombies. He's got to kill the zombies or else he gets killed. That's what she's talking about. It's zombies and creepers and some other black thing with long arms.
Well, you see, that's what's amazing. I would play for 20 minutes and I miss all that.
Well, so they only come out at night. We can talk about
Yeah.
Maybe you have an older version that doesn't have the survival mode in. I do think they added it.
Okay.
But in any case, if you're playing with him, and research does show, you know, when the parents are playing, obviously, it's a great thing. And talking and interacting, understanding how our kids are processing these images, how they're perceiving them is so important. And you're doing all the right things in doing that. And when you see something,
and all this other stuff. I mean, you know.
If you're not seeing it, it may not be there.
Okay.
You know, it might not be in the game yet. Maybe it's at a different level, or just watch for it and see what you think. Yeah, see what you think about it, and if it comes up.
Earlier in your presentation, you were talking about the dangers of screen time in general. You know, TV, iPad, telephone. And the recommendations of maybe not exceeding 2 hours a day. But then I feel like sometimes we veer off on a conversation of video games, and you know, there's so much danger with video games and the violence that we lose track of the initial recommendations about just even simply TV and phones and iPads. And even though they can seem, you know, educational, we're doing all these educational apps, and even,
right.
you know, even in our school now, there's so much access to
Yes.
screen time,
Right.
that it's hard to make decisions at home. How much more, if any, screen time do I want my child to have?
Right, and making the decision, you know, if you're going to follow these guidelines, 1 to 2 hours a day, or 2 to 3 at the most for older kids. This is in addition to school, and this is all screens. So that is one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is, what do you want childhood to be for your children? You know, what experiences do you want your child to have? To have the childhood you imagine for your child, what you think is best for your child. I think it's a very sad case that we're putting childhood into screen technology. Childhood is a time of exploration of a lot of different talents and abilities, especially middle childhood, as they grow. And if they're spending a lot of time on the screen playing an app or learning from an app, it doesn't matter. In one way, it doesn't matter, because it's the same process they're going through. They're not learning to pick up a violin and play a violin. They're learning to negotiate an app on a screen and play it. They're not taking a hike and experiencing that. So, do we want the screen experience to exceed life experiences or have more time on it? And I would say not for healthy childhood development.
So what is the effect on the brain at this young age, elementary age, of just simple screen technology versus the video game violence?
Okay, so screen technology, if they're in a two-dimensional reality, you see that below brain connects to the spinal column, and that's the place of sensory integration. So in other words, we have, as human beings, we have the brain and the nervous system. And that nervous system hooks to the spinal column and is part of all of our senses. Screen time has been called sensory deprivation. And let me explain that, because when we're in sensory deprivation, one or two of our senses are overstimulated and the others are understimulated. And so when a child is on a screen, you can have the child, their visual is there, right? It's really accented and a little auditory, but there are researchers showing that if they're not even listening in the same way they would listen to reading because the auditory carries it. So auditory is there. They're usually not doing anything. They're usually not moving. They're usually sitting. So therefore, let's pretend that this woman here, I have tied her up and she can't move. And I'm going to do this intermittently and just tap you like this. Now I'm not hurting you. You just aren't moving. You can't move. But here's the tap. Now, I think you'll be honest with me. After about 3 to 4 hours, national average of time on the screen, what do you feel like doing to me? Yes. Thank you. You feel like breaking out. You feel you have to break out. Sensory deprivation is a torture device, and we know what it's like to hear the drip of the faucet when we're trying to sleep. Everything else is quiet, and that drip drives us nuts. And we have to put something, get a washcloth on that, gotta call the plumber tomorrow, because it revs up the central nervous system. When senses, everything else is not being used, and one or two are heightened, you can't get away from it. So you have this revving up, needing to break free. So when the kids are there, they're watching, and this would be without the parents with them. This would be when they're just taking in passive entertainment, okay? There is this risk of this sensory deprivation because they're just being revved up. The change of image is happening like this tap. The change of image is happening every 2 to 3 seconds, sometimes 1 to 2. Okay? The eyes are resting on those images. The eyes say, okay, I am watching a screen that is usually, if you have a large screen, that's fine, a smaller screen. The smaller, the less eye movement. Okay? The less eye movement, the less cortical function, because the optic nerve, the only nerve connected to the thinking function. You know yourself in meditation, don't move your eyes, right? If you want to learn how to meditate, you stare at something. If you close your eyes, it's harder to meditate. And all the Zen meditators and people that are very serious meditators keep their eyes open and stare straight ahead. Because if you do that, you go into an alpha brainwave state. You get out of the beta active brainwave state. And we know this when we daydream. We look out the window and we're daydreaming. Teachers can call on the child that's looking out the window and daydreaming, and the child says, how does she know? You know, what? I haven't been paying attention. I've been wandering in my mind. I've been drifting off into an alpha brainwave. So when we watch television, a lot of adults, I'm one of them, use TV to zone out and to veg out so I don't have to think, so that I can just be mesmerized here by what's going on and I can get closer to an alpha state, kind of cleans out the cobwebs and watch a good movie, you know? It really helps. Certain personality styles need it, actually, I think. So we get in that alpha state, but a child in the alpha state then is vulnerable to the change of image. The change of image is going here. The alpha state is like her being tied up. She's not going to move. It's very hard to move away from television images once you're there. Researchers have tried, told college students, get up during the commercial, do exercises, do this, do that. They don't get up. You know yourself. You sit for one show, you might want to watch another. Well, let's watch the news. It's hard to get up. So here you go. I'm there, and then I'm revved up with the change of image, and I'm only 5 or 6 years old. What's going to happen? More aggressiveness, lack of cooperation, or whininess, because they have been assaulted. The brain body of the child needs movement. The brain, I like to say, the brain the body needs the body brain need the movement. Not only the body, but the brain needs it. And so that's one major piece. The sensory integration, the sensory activities aren't there in 2 dimensions. So I know we can get all excited about Crayola coming in and having the kids, you know, do something on a screen and learn to draw on a screen, and get the butcher paper out, get the poster out, there's a big difference between doing art with watercolors and a thin brush, than having a thick crayon and going like this on a big poster board. A very different experience to the brain. We might all think it's art, but the child's brain is firing in all these different places with all the different textures and tactile sensations. But here's the rub. It's always the same experience to the brain of taking in images off the screen. It's the same experience. It doesn't allow for this brain to go into, oh, I have to think about what does it feel like to hold a watercolor brush, as opposed to, oh, I'm painting with my dad with this big brush and we're painting the fence. These are different experiences tactily, and they're opening up different places of the brain in the neural network. So the neural networks are being laid down in the first 3 years of life, and most of them are laid down by 36 months. That's why before 3, it's playing Russian roulette. But after that, you're still laying down networks, neural networks for sensory integration. If the low brain isn't operating properly, if this can't take in senses and learn, then the limbic and the neurotransmitters get affected. When the neurotransmitters get affected, you have depression, dopamine deprivation, you have serotonin problems, you have who knows what, you have neuroadrenaline maybe being rampant throughout the body because the regulation can't come in now. So the brain grows and refines itself from the bottom up, from early childhood into adolescence, and it isn't completely grown and developed until now age 22 or 23. And that's a short version.
You covered the vital 5. Can you show us the slide of the vital 5?
Yeah, the vital 5, and I'm not just, yeah, and I'll give you those before we go. And another question while I'm doing this.
Yes, ma'am. The one thing I wanted to say is that as an educator, we're trained in a lot of brain research. I mean, of course, not as much as she is. And so I do want to let you guys know that teachers are aware of, you know, time limits and stuff like that. There's not enough time in a class, in the day in a classroom to use the computers and stuff like that for 2 to 3 hours. So don't, I mean, and they're not just sitting them there at the computer to utilize things. They're creating things, and they're using all different types of tactile, and that's why they do, you know, the centers or the stations throughout, and only so much time at this. So just so that you're aware also with that.
Okay, and then where are you? This. Okay, this one. Thank you. And that's a great idea. And you have so many resources and helpful people that know the brain research. If you, and you can Google it, it's there. The information is there. I have a list of books. I always have a recent book, you know, book list for the people in my program and about digital technologies, and some of it is a little scholarly, but I think if you want that list, I can get that to Janelle. It's a great list. You have 2 things on the website, on the parent education website. You have my 100 family media literacy activities, and we won't get into media literacy today, but media literacy, talking about the screens, helping the kids discern, are up there, and they're by age and stage of development. So about 30 activities for each age and stage of development. And then you also have one of my ebooks that is about brain-compatible parenting. It's 36 ideas, 36 things for cognitive, emotional, social development, spiritual development, 36 types of activities or ways to think about it, you know, like physical, emotional. It's brought into different categories for parents. I like to translate this brain research into practical applications because I do think that the daily decisions we do as parents are the most important thing. We transform our world with the daily decisions we make because our kids will become the people from the cumulative effects of our decisions. Let me go through the Vital Five and then I'll take some other questions if people can stay because I think some people may need to go. The bonding, and if you have the book, each chapter, there's a chapter on each of these in the book, and Parenting Well, that's here, and each chapter has activities by ages and stages of development here too on these. What I did was research what are the human needs that will grow optimal cognitive, emotional, social development, right? Moral development. And getting down to 5, you know, there are areas in each of these that can be teased out that you would gain from these. So these are the leverage points within the system. The bonding, the time, and having authentic conversations with your children. And I highly advocate family meetings and one-on-one time for older kids. You know you have to be with your baby and toddler and spend a lot of time, but as kids get older, life gets hectic. If you are doing a regular weekly meeting, you might want to think about that. It gives the kids something to look forward to. It's time where you can do your disciplining when it's not in the heat of the moment. It's time when you can talk about what you appreciate about each other as a family, talk about what's going well in this basket around digital. It's time, it would be a great time to talk about the nuances that you're experiencing, even with a 7-year-old, you know, this is great. You can talk about what you're concerned about. How is he experiencing this? And doesn't he know that, you know, this is a play act to be in survival mode. You're not in survival mode and you don't have to hurt other people to survive. Giving a counter message to what they're getting in their play scenarios. A family meeting, my husband liked to call it the business of living. That we're, you know, here we are about the business of living, and we can not only have time together as a family, but we can show and understand each other's schedules. We can learn to look at our chores and renegotiate chores. We can see, oh, Matt has a test on Friday night. Will Adam take his dishwashing, whatever, and obligation. So there's a way you can look at it as a team effort and a way to certainly ground the child for expectations, and it really helps behavior issues. The other thing that helps behavior issues and supports the relationship, the authentic relationship we want with our kids is one-on-one time if you have more than one child. It's sometimes hard to do, but so well worth it. And having that time special, it doesn't have to be long, 20 minutes, it could be an hour, it could be half a day. Doing something, it doesn't have to require money, it's just time when you're totally present and available to your child. You're not distracted by anything, you've made this sacred time, one-on-one, they get you, you talk to them, they will open up, and the bonding, it'll be a wonderful bonding experience. And those are the memories that they will take with them to college. They won't remember anything else, probably. The second is the interior life, and as I probably have showed, I'm so concerned about all the external forces out there where kids' attention is out there. 2,000 ads a day, they see, you know, all these apps, all this, all that. They don't get time to spend inside of themselves. And when they're bored, often is they go and reach for an app, or we might give them something or think about it, but yet boredom is the place the artist called the void, the fertile void, where nothing is happening yet, but anything is possible. And letting them experience some time being uncomfortable in boredom. I told my kids one time, you know, they were bored and they didn't want to do all these things I said, go outside, it's a beautiful day, no, I don't want to do that, we don't want to do this. I said, all right, I just got aggravated, and I said, sit on the couch right now and just sit there, be bored. Just stay bored. Feel it, be bored. And when you're done being bored, get up. And they looked at me like I was nuts, but they did it because they knew from the tone of my voice. And so then they finally figured out something they wanted to do, and you know, it worked out. But the inside, I'm really for advocating intrinsic motivation and tweaking our parenting strategies a little bit so we help them figure it out from inside themselves. And growing this interior life for older kids, there are a lot of different activities like think time, just asking them to think about something. So they have to meander in their heads a little bit, and then you talk about it an hour later or a week later. It doesn't matter because they're inside themselves. How do they get inside? We used to be able to stare up at the clouds and just be as kids, and those times are maybe over, and we have to be more intentional about making them for childhood, because that's where they find out who they are. You can't find out who you are anywhere else easily, you know, and know who you are. Think about and process. The image making, so image making is a part of our mammalian brain. We visualize a possible solution with every problem we solve. Our brain, to a large degree, lives in the future. A lot of the tracking that you're doing now might have to do with what you're doing for the rest of the day. You know, you can track 3 or 4 things as adults, maybe even more, in your mind. Kids can't, but we can be thinking about future, past, end state, in the present. How do we support children's ability to be in their own imagination? And we talked a little bit about that, and image making is so critical to the growth. Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge. You know, and it is, in a sense, that with an imagination you can come up with any idea. We need imaginative people today with all of the complex problems that are supporting, you know, that aren't supporting us as human beings. We can't seem to solve them, from homelessness to the climate problems to just massive systems. They're systemic problems. So growing a child's imagination grows them into an innovative thinker later on. And that's what a lot of companies are looking for too, you know, people who think out of the box. The image making leads to creative expression. What I really value about technology are ways for the kids to use their own creative talents and abilities. So, in other words, I know a 14-year-old, one of my colleagues, her daughter writes a blog about her brother's sports team. You know, another one, a teen writing a blog about reviews. They're using technology to have a creative outlet, a creative expression. So, you know, using an app to somehow take it further, make this, do this, and they are being creative in Minecraft too, so that's a good thing if they're not learning to dominate and kill, which they don't have to. They can. There's a way out of it. But the creative expression, I believe we're born to create, really. If we're not creating something, we're not happy. We're not happy. And it's got to be with our talents and our abilities. And you know yourself, if you make a meal from leftovers or something and it comes out good and people like it, you know, hey, you feel great about it. You finish a knitting project, or it doesn't, we feel great. It doesn't have to be this big thing. We are born to create and co-create with each other, with God, I believe, and contribute. The next one is contribute as relationship. Meaningful contribution. So when your child has a chore to do, you can frame it in the way, you know, that really helps me right now, that's helping us, that's helping Mommy and Daddy a lot. We appreciate it, because when the child contributes to you, they feel belonging. We feel like we belong to that which we contribute to. You contribute your time, your presence to the parent education, to the school. You belong to it. You belong to your group. The child needs to feel that kind of sense of belonging to the family. They contribute so much time, in our society at least, to screen time. And they belong, you know, they belong to Instagram, or they belong to the relationship with the digital device. And we want to help them belong to us as first and foremost, and to know that. So contribution as relationship is a way to think about reframing children's and teens' contributions as being in relationship to that which is meaningful to them. And those are the vital needs of human beings that I believe are being shortchanged in our media society, digital culture, that we need to be more intentional about to bring them into our daily life. Okay, a few more questions, and then we'll see if I can, I don't know if I can get through. Yes, okay.
Yes. I think it's harder to avoid the iPad or other screen technology in digital age. My main concern is how to help my child to gain self-control over those devices like iPad. My child is like 6 years old.
Okay, your child can't control them yet at 6 years old.
I usually restrict him like 20 minutes a day
Okay.
on the iPad, but he resists. I feel like if I push him too much, it's going to increase his desire for playing those games. So I'm trying to find a balanced way so he can gradually develop his own self-regulation.
Yes, I like how you put that, gradually develop, because it is gradually developed. At 6 years old, the brain can't self-regulate the visual media devices very easily, especially an iPad that gives them freedom to do things, so he wants to do it. What we've been talking about, the protective factors, and what we've been talking about, the time limits. In other words, your modeling of the time limit of 20 minutes as he grows. 8 or 9 years old, he's going to start learning to regulate. But before the age of 7 or 8, there's no cognitive function that can help him regulate it without you setting the time limit, I guess, is part of it. The second piece of that, as he gets older, then what works? You can ask him, even now it might work, but in another year, this will work better. What works for you to put your own time limit on your iPad? What can we do? What works for you? How is it easier for you to stop playing the iPad in the morning, or is it easier for you to stop playing it in the afternoon? Do you find that when you have exercise, you can play the iPad longer? Do you find that if you're playing the iPad, your body feels like you need exercise? You can ask him questions about his bodily, mental needs and how they're being fulfilled or not being fulfilled by the iPad, and helping him get in touch with his thinking about those processes. But in terms of self-regulation, the best way to do it is, of course, to regulate him now. He can't do it himself yet. Okay.
Yeah, you know, the guidelines of the 2-3 hours a day. I mean, I think I give my kids, you know, maybe 30 minutes, sometimes 45. But I mean, they get home, let's say, you know, from school around 4, homework, dinner time, family time. That 2-3 hours seems like so much to me.
It does, doesn't it? It does. It's more, I don't agree with it either. I didn't want to say that, but I don't agree with it either. It's the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines. And it is a lot, but you know what? There are a lot of parents using it in the morning while they get ready for work or before they take the child to childcare. And I think that the AAP has just about done all it can to keep these limits. If they go any lower, they're going to be attacked so much. And I think they've done a marvelous job to keep the limits. So yeah, I think you're right. And the less time in childhood on screen technology, the bottom line for me is the better. And they will grow and they will learn it. They will learn it easier and be wiser self-regulators, because that is the way the mammalian brain works.
We're kind of the same. We just don't have time, basically. And my husband and I don't enjoy screens, technology. I mean, I'm kind of scared of it, actually. So I have like all kinds of limits on my kids. But I almost want my soon-to-be 11-year-old, he would, if I let him, he would just go crazy, but I don't. But I almost would rather him almost like go to a summer school class and learn how to create his own app, just to understand
Sure.
how
Mhm.
computers work, how computer systems work.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, part of me too has a fear that since we are so anti-technology,
Mhm.
he's gonna have like no skills
Mhm.
when he gets older and actually has to have a job, or
Mhm.
he has some kind of, he has some friends who went to summer school to learn to write code for their own Minecraft
Mhm.
worlds. I don't even really understand how it works, but
Mhm.
do you have any suggestions on how, I don't know, a healthy way for your children to understand how computers work, computer systems work, or how to...
I think what you're saying is a great idea. I mean, a summer camp of exposure to technology at a certain age, is he showing an interest in it, that he would like to do it?
No, not really. I mean, he shows interest in that he wants to, he's more into watch, he would rather watch TV probably than anything, but he's definitely, if you give him the iPad, he will sit there on it and play some apps. I'd almost rather him say, well, if you're that, and make your own app, or at least understand how this works, and you're not just
I think
in their
that
world, and you're kind of having some sort of understanding about what you're even doing.
right, and I think that is a great idea. There might be timeliness involved. Maybe in another year he might be interested.
Yeah, right, not right now.
It might.
Maybe when he's
Maybe
older.
as he gets older, absolutely, as he gets older. The other thing, I understand your fear that, he might just not be, he might be left out, but he'll be able to learn it as he goes.
Like, he'll learn as he goes in school. And
I think he will. Is he learning as he goes now? Have you seen?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, is he a good learner?
Yeah,
I mean,
he's a good learner.
is he a reader?
Yes, he's a reader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so he has literacy, and there's a big relationship between language development and critical thinking development. The more language you give a child, the more complex language, the more they read high-level books, Newbery Award winners. We used to read editorials to our kids. This article in Forbes about the robots, I would read it to my 11-year-old.
Okay.
I would read it at a family meeting and say, what do you guys think about this? This is really interesting, kids having their own robots, a 17-year-old, because he's a reader and a thinker. So now you could start bringing in technology things for him to think about, but things that you approve of, and he plays enough, you're limiting it, he knows your stance. My kids knew my stance. One of my sons, he was the one that would be addicted if I let him be. He loved movies, he loved that. So when he got to college, but he didn't, it worked out. It worked out according to the research, right? Okay, I did everything I'm talking to you about, and it's not easy. But he became, okay, so he's working on his PhD, he'll be done in May. But what he did was specialize in media, so he's become a media scholar. And it's like, it's crazy. I mean, but he tweets, he has 3,000 followers or whatever on his Twitter account, and he tweets a lot, but guess what happened? He started tweeting about what students were saying about their professors. And this was like this big thing in the Chronicle of Higher Learning, got a hold of him and asked him to write an article because it's about public and private space and all these esoteric nuances, right, and all these things. And now the Atlantic Monthly asked him, the editor asked him to write an article on this. He got 1,000 more Twitter followers, and he's worried about, getting a job with the university when he's done, but maybe this will help him. So what I'm saying is, as long as he's thinking, we need people like my son, in terms of the scholarly approach, and he's introduced me to a lot of different scholars on media that I wouldn't have known about. And he knew what I thought about it, but now he's taken this other stance, which is fabulous. And I've learned from him, and he's using his unique contributions. So who knows what will be inside the head of your son as he goes through adolescence with your stance. I would never worry about him getting left behind. You can go and learn things in a summer, if he feels he wants a job in technology and he doesn't know how to do it, he can learn it. We can learn it. I said yesterday, I think there's a myth about, the digital natives. I don't like the term. I think that part of it is, it's true, right? They know it, they understand the technology in a way that we don't, that have to learn it. But, like I gave the example, I never thought of myself as a dial phone native. And I was a dial phone native. When I picked it up, the dial tone went. But before that, my mother had to deal with an operator. What number would you like? 339. Okay, thank you. I'll connect you. And when I picked up the phone, one phone on a kitchen wall, yellow with a long cord, that I went around the corner to talk, I got a dial phone and not an operator. Wonders. But nobody called me a dial phone native. And I doubt if our ancestors called their, people, their children, oh, he's a fire native, he knows how to make fire. He knows how to make fire real easily. He's a fire native. We had to rub stones together and figure it out. We gave them that technology. And so part of it is that we can't usurp our authority over them, that they're digital natives and now they can teach us how to get on, Facebook or whatever because they gravitate to it. But anybody can learn it, you can learn it. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, not worry. So I guess it's time to conclude. I really appreciate you being here to the end. I thought we had till 11:45 and I think that's just about it. No, it's not even 11:45 yet. But we have until 11:30. Okay, whatever. I'm being cued to end.
They just told me 11:30, but...
Oh, I thought it was 11:45. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. There's one more thing I would like to say. There are two handouts I'd like to just... The one is 6 truths about the slow brain. And, if you give your child some activities that are slower moving to juxtapose the fast pace of screen technology, it's really going to help grow that cerebral cortex, okay? The second thing is, the other handout is with older kids, like in 4th or 5th grade, and maybe a child who's 8 would be ready, but you can start developing with your child a media digital contract, an agreement. And there are sample agreements you can find on the web. I didn't bring you a sample agreement because I wanted to, I would rather you not have that. I would rather you negotiate it with your children, with your family. And this is something you can do in family meetings. And I give you 4 steps there over 4 family meetings over a course of a month or 2, if you have a weekly or every other week meeting, where you can put out all the pieces of the issues and come up with the rules and have your kids involved in helping make those rules that they're going to agree to, that this is a process. And so look over that and hopefully it can be helpful. I believe in keeping our authority and yet keep open-minded so we get their opinion, like your 11-year-old. It would be good, well, what are the agreements that you're keeping so that I don't have to always be the monitor, and this is going to help the self-regulation because this is what you've agreed to and it works. And then keep amplifying what's working, keep tweaking what isn't, and change the agreement every 6 months as the child matures and shows you that they're earning your trust and they're getting older and their cortex is growing as you keep doing all the wonderful things you're doing to support them in that growth. So thank you very much for staying this long and I hope this was helpful. Thank you.